But when I first started transitioning, when I first started telling people about it, I'd actually just met what ended up becoming later my wife and the mother to my child. And I told her, just as we started getting together, I was like, hey, I'm transitioning. And she's like, well, then I guess I'm a lesbian and blah, 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 because we were soulmates and all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, sweet, that takes a lot of pressure off. And so she was with me for the first part of my transition. And then we split up, and oddly enough, it had nothing to do with my transition. We had differences as people and as parents and as, partners and this and that. But it really, maybe for her, it did, because I lost some of my masculinity. That's what a lot of women are attracted to. I still had my personality, but it was never like part of our conversations or part of our issues. But yeah, no, I never had an issue. And then I ended up being in the LGBT scene, and so it was a lot easier finding partners. Now I can't date regularly. I can't just go to the bar and talk to someone because I look like this, and it's like we want to go back to my place, and I'm like, hey, I gotta tell you something. Like we gotta have that talk. So I can't meet regularly. But in the LGBT scene, I'm like, I have detransitioned or I'm trans, and people are like, that's great, cool. What parts you got? We can work with it. They make all sorts of attachments for whoever, and I can navigate my way that way. But relationships wise, like actual out in the world, not just physically, it's the same. I operate as a male in my relationships, and the girls that I've been with are totally happy with it. Bedroom stuff gets complicated, but besides that, I'm just still, I hold hands and I drive the car and I open the
Mm.
doors, but that's just who I am as a person. So yeah, I've always dated fine because I've either been transparent about it, which is funny
Mm.
because I'm a transparent, that I can be so transparent, uh,
Yeah,
um,
it's good.
with my partners and with my friends. So even when I started talking to her, when we started, um, just like getting flirty with each other, even when I start getting flirty with someone, if I notice something happening, I'm like, hey, just to let you know, laying it out here, like, is that something you would want to pursue? And I've never really had anybody say no. They're always just like, well, that actually seems more fun, so yeah, let's do it. And it's
Mm.
kind of like an experiment of, wait, what does this feel like? But I can't date, women who want to be with a traditional
Mm.
or normal, quote unquote, guy. um, I have to be with someone that's kind of on the fence, that's wants something kind of unorthodox. But yeah, I've still never had a problem dating, which has been crazy that I've
So,
been able to find enough.
okay, so tell me if this is going too far, but like, how does that work then, sexually? I mean, do you just have to, be creative is it a lot of scissoring? I mean, what goes on?
Yeah, if we want to get in the details of it, there can be, and that's what's
Yeah.
so different. Of the same way that a male and a female would find
Mm.
interesting ways to do things. Like
Mm.
sometimes you bring pudding in and you do something upside
Mm.
down, and
Yeah.
maybe you rub this thing this way.
Mm.
We do the same thing.
Right.
You rub parts together, you touch things, you got
Okay.
hands and mouths and stuff, and
Yeah.
everyone just kind of does stuff. So I've been with partners that have been open
Mm.
and exploratory, which how I was as a male
Mm.
too, which actually led into my transition because I had a lot of inclinations and a lot of things sexually that I was like, these aren't normal guy feelings. There's a lot of things I
Yes.
want to do in this spectrum that aren't normal male things. And so I was like, well, maybe that has to do with this. And then along with everything else, it was like, okay, that's a part of it. And
But
I
is your
realized that
is your
those things,
actual, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
is this vagina that you've had made, I mean, it's hard to say, does it feel like a real vagina because you would
Does
never
it
know.
function? Yeah, because I don't
But
know.
does it, I mean, would you say though that given what you know about vaginas, that it is as close to a sensitive and feeling vagina as one that if you were born with? I mean, is that like, how does it work? Like, I'm guessing there's not a clitoris.
No, actually there is. So it
Really?
was
Well,
there.
how's that? Oh God, it's too much.
Yeah, yeah. There didn't used to be. So back
Right.
10 to 15 years ago, it
Yeah.
was they just cut it off. And then it turned
Right.
into, well, we can kind of give you one. And actually the procedure I got,
Yeah.
it was designed for women who had damage. So say their legs got cut off or they're in some
Mm.
accident and they had to rebuild it. They did the
Mm.
same thing with mine and they rebuild it in the same way. And actually it works the same way as, so when we're embryos and when we're in utero, all of our parts are the same, and then they transition from one thing to another, but we still have all the same parts. So the top of a male's part is actually the clitoris, and the outsides of a male part is actually this thing, and they all just morph in utero anyway. So all the doctors do is basically reverse all that stuff. So it's fascinating if you ever want to look it up, what a vaginoplasty looks like. But yeah, they like turn it inside out and take this part and turn it into this thing, and then put this part over here and stitch this thing together, and it's crazy. Um, But yeah, no, when I used it, I don't anymore. Because after detransitioning, it feels weird now for someone to be inside my body. Because I'm like, you shouldn't be.
Yeah, what was that
But
like? What was that like, the feeling when like you're actually being penetrated?
yeah, so I had experimented with that with, backdoor stuff,
Right.
when I was fully a male, and I was like, okay, this is gonna feel better later. It hurts now, but the feeling of being feminine, felt better. Um, but I was like, but it hurts, like this is
Mm.
uncomfortable. So I would rather have these other parts. And so once I got them, yeah, it was pretty great actually. While I was still feeling that way, while I still felt like a female, it was
Mm.
amazing. It was everything I thought it was going to be. And then I realized I was just as happy with my old parts and how
Oh,
happy they
really?
made me doing stuff as these ones do. Like it was six of one, half a dozen the other. Like it was different. It was very different, and it was
Mm.
more satisfying in a different way, but less satisfying in other ways. Um,
Mm.
and it made me realize a lot about sex and how it differs for the sexes. I've actually written like a little article about it, and I want to turn it into poems and all this other stuff that I write. But it's very much as a whole, not just physically and not just on the different parts of stimulation, but as a whole, intercourse is different for each side. And it's so hard to explain without really getting into the whole thing. But when I'm going to use words that don't really mean this, but they are the best way I can think of to describe them. So when you're the male in the relationship or the top or however you want to do it, because even lesbian couples can have it and all this kind of stuff. But when you're the person doing the actions, you are the aggressor. And there's certain levels of feelings that go along with that and thoughts and ideas. And then when you're the receiver, there are certain thoughts and ideas and actions that go along with that. That's why in public you can be like, oh, that's a top, that's a bottom, that's a this, that's a that. And men and women can go either way. And so it's not assigning it specifically to a gender. But when you're on one side or the other, or when your parts align with one side or the other, you do have different feelings about intercourse and about your partner and about your interactions. And so those did, yeah, they had to switch. I went from being this top and the person kind of in charge, and the person, because when you're with someone, they're submitting to you, they're allowing you to enter their body, and there's all this stuff that goes along with it. And so when you're the person being entered and allowing someone to enter your body, it's a lot different. There's a lot of feelings that go along with it that are not better or worse, just different. And so I got to see it on both sides of things.